Hi, everybody. It's Nigel Giam here, and I'm the lead GP training program director for St Mary's and course director for Mentor MRCGP. I am absolutely delighted to have Anuj join us today to talk about his recent SCA success. It's been an absolute challenging journey, and it's
Yeah.
so nice to see this guy smile because there was some blood, sweat, and tears in that process of getting to this amazing place. Anuj,
Yeah.
welcome. Lovely to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
No
Thank
problem
you.
at all. So tell the audience a little bit about your journey because I think there will be many in the audience who can relate to
Yeah.
just how challenging your journey has been so far. So do
Yeah.
tell the audience a little bit.
So, well, my journey started ST3 with both the exams to do, the AKT, and at the time we started with the
Gosh,
RCA.
so we're talking pandemic era, aren't we?
Pandemic year,
I can,
pandemic year. So, we did the AKT, but the challenge was recording cases for the RCA. So I had a couple of attempts of that before we went into the SCA, and because the SCA was supposed to be a standardized consultation exam, to be very honest, I didn't do much of like training, or
yeah,
I thought, it would be quite straightforward. I
yeah,
didn't have it.
yeah,
And then after my first attempt, we obviously met, and I was part of your course. And actually, that changed my perspective towards the exam, a full 180 degrees.
yeah,
I was not aware of a lot of things
yeah,
that I started doing and improved on my
yeah.
consultation. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's great because actually, obviously, from the previous sitting up to this most successful sitting, your marks jumped up by 14 marks, which is no easy
yes,
measure. But there are a lot of people who often resit and just end up either getting the same mark or just actually doing worse, actually.
yeah,
So, I would like to talk a little bit, I suppose, about your battle plans, and I think that's what's going
yeah,
to really mean a lot to the audience here, who are kind of facing this challenge and thinking to themselves, you know what, I just can't do it because we know it's attainable, absolutely, but
yeah.
it is so important to have a strategy and a game plan. So we'll break it down as we do in these interviews into data gathering, clinical management, and relating to others. And if maybe you could give a few top tips for data gathering, what were your game changers from the previous sitting to the most recent successful sitting? What do you think really matters here?
I think the first thing is in the data gathering, it's important to see what information has been given to you already
Yeah,
and have the battle plan ready.
yeah.
Because I didn't have a battle plan before that. So, I got into the habit of developing a battle plan.
Hmm.
Um, Open questions still have importance,
Mm.
even though it's a standardized exam, but you have to ask open questions because
Mhm.
that's the starting point.
Yeah,
One of the mantras that I followed was the
yeah,
symptom and story,
yeah,
and that's the important bit. That's the
absolutely.
most important bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely agree with you. So when that patient's giving you the cue, we follow that cue, we open up that question. But as you say, open questions, of course, very important in real life, important in this exam. But then, they're going to stop, aren't they? Because then if you start saying
Yes.
any other symptoms, it's just going to be met with,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
I've missed. So it's important to be focused. And I suppose when we follow those cues and follow the narrative, often the ice is in there, isn't it? And that's very,
Yes.
very important. We're going to come back to that, I suppose, in the relating to others aspect. What about the clinical management, which again, carries 1.5 times more marks compared to obviously the other two domains? And I think a lot of people find this very, very challenging. What were your game changers there?
So one of the things that we spoke through the one-to-one classes was uh, that being confident
Yeah,
in uncertainty.
yeah,
So you just follow what you think is correct and what you would do in general practice, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking
exactly.
for an independent GP.
Yeah,
So you need to follow what you've been doing,
yeah,
and there are going to be stations where you are going to negotiate
yeah,
quite a lot.
yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah,
yeah. So you have to have that plan ready of how I'm going to negotiate, because there are going to be lifestyle stations.
yeah,
There are going to be stations where people don't agree with what your plan is,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they want something else. So
Yeah.
just trying to convince them or coming to a middle ground,
Middle ground.
and that's the
Yeah.
most important bit.
Yeah, and I suppose that brings us very nicely onto relating to others, because I think a lot of people feel that maybe relating to others is just about being really nice, and but ultimately that can often lead to the patient driving the consultation, and
Yeah.
obviously it's your assessment, so you're the driver. So you talked about, I suppose, negotiation and finding the middle ground. What was your kind of bridgeway into that? How do you negotiate well? What sort of game changes did you have there?
So, what the previous habit that I had to change was I used to ask eyes quite late into the
Yeah,
consultation.
yeah, yeah.
So that's what I changed, getting the eyes quite
Early.
quickly
Yeah.
in. So we know if we get an idea of what this patient is expecting, and if I don't offer this, then what are the other
Mm.
options, and how can I convince them
Yeah,
to use what I'm saying, or
yeah,
follow what
yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
And you remember that
Um,
favorite word that we use, of course, in our intense one-to-one sessions, which is dilemma.
Dilemma.
Because
Yes, yes,
that is the bridgeway, obviously, into, I
yeah,
suppose, when you can't meet a patient's expectations.
yeah,
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because people do underestimate the amount of negotiation that happens in this exam.
yeah,
Um, and I think often in study groups we don't challenge each other perhaps as hard as we should do with these sorts of quite emotive consultations where you're feeling you're kind of
yeah.
being pushed into a corner. But actually, that's kind of real life general practice, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is quite reflective, this exam of real life general practice, because they will push you until either you convince them or you cave. So they will try and
I
push you.
like
So
until you convince them or you cave.
so you have to be ready with these consultation skills. And one of the things that I learned was the AEE.
Yeah,
So I had the A and the E,
yeah,
but to energize the third E was very important, which
yeah,
I learned.
yeah,
Because it's not just okay to say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that,
yeah.
or I understand, or something like that, but you have to empathize and energize the patient as well. Like,
Absolutely.
what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. Exactly. So just for our audience, AEE, and for those of you coming on the masterclass, stands for acknowledgement. And that's really acknowledging the emotion that's in front of us, whether they're
Yeah.
angry, whether they're sad. It's about empathizing with the situation. But then this energy that Anuj talks about is this aspect of transference. What can we do to help the patient? And Anuj is now full of energy after this
Yes.
long journey.
Yes.
What is the plan? When are you due to CCT?
So I'm CCTing next week, actually.
Oh,
Uh,
yes. And
yes.
after, is it a break? Spend some time with your family? What's going to be happening?
Yeah. So bit of a break, and then looking for a salary GP, and then looking for things to do as a special interest. I think that's something
Good.
that's
Absolutely. Keep yourself alive in general practice because I suppose it's one
yeah.
challenge to a next challenge, isn't it? But we're up for the
Yeah.
challenge. We're always
Yeah.
up for the challenge. Anuj, it was lovely to have
Yes.
you on
Yes.
board here today. Thank you so much for your time and your
Thank you
effort.
so much. Thank
Our
you.
sessions, I
Thank you.
really enjoyed our sessions.
Yeah.
I'll kind of miss them. I know you won't, but but general practice is a small world. You must keep
Yeah.
in touch. All right. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
definitely, definitely.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Take care.